We interview a fair number of female experts, climate and energy experts here on Energy Media, and we thought it'd be interesting to interview a few of them, do a little profile, get to know them a bit better for International Women's Day. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Sara Hastings-Simon from the University of Calgary and the Colorado School of Mines. So welcome to the interview, Sara.
Thanks for having me.
Well, look, you grew up in California, you got a doctorate in physics, and now you're a Canadian expert on clean energy and clean technology. Please explain how the heck that happened.
It's a good question. I sometimes ask myself. So yeah, as you say, my academic background is in physics, and I've always been interested in energy, really from quite a young age, actually. And so after I finished my degree and I was looking to do something really different, I wanted something faster paced than experimental lab research that I was doing. And so I went and worked for McKinsey for a number of years and found my way to Canada and have just gotten more and more into the energy space. And I found I've been able to really apply sort of what I know from a technical background, combine that with the business insights, and then also the policy work that I really learned when I was at the Pembina Institute, and kind of approach these energy problems through these multiple lenses.
Now, you grew up in Davis, which is kind of, I think it's known as kind of a liberal community there. How did that affect, the path you took to get to here?
Well, energy and using energy efficiently was definitely part of the conversation from early on. I actually grew up in a neighborhood in Davis that was a sort of planned community. All the homes had elements of passive solar heating, as well as at the time solar hot water. It was sort of before the era really of much solar PV being affordable. And so that, I think from early on, was just the idea of talking about where we get our energy from and what happens when we use it has been a part of that. I got to spend some time when I was an undergrad at the National Renewable Energy Lab. I did an internship there, and that was really neat to learn more about energy and what kind of at the time was really cutting edge energy technologies. And then again, it kind of came back to energy through that work on the business side, really working with utilities who at the time were thinking a lot about what the utility of the future looks like and what it means to kind of think about this big shift within the sector. And one of the things that I saw that was really interesting was this sort of period of kind of understanding first of almost like a sense that there wasn't going to not be any change within utilities, and then over time, executives sort of saying, no, actually, things are changing after being really the same for a very long time, and so that kind of carried me through to I think where I am today.
Well, let's talk about women in the energy sector. And of course, the energy sector encompasses a wide range of industries and types of energy. But I have a few memories of maybe 20 years ago in oil and gas, and there would be young female engineers at that time, oil and gas engineers, who were kind of treated, by the old boys club as token hires. Really, I don't think it took them a long time to get accepted in that culture. Did you run into any of that in your career?
Yeah, I mean, physics also, I think is notorious for having, well, really, I think, frankly, having challenges around diversity and around really having women being accepted. I was lucky that I didn't personally experience any really direct, I think, challenges. But it certainly, I've heard from leading scholars in the field that I was in, who would have said things like, well, women just aren't quite as smart. They're not at the edge of the curve to be really good physicists. So that kind of thinking was definitely out there. I think I personally had a lot of support, again, from quite a young age, from my family, from my parents, and the community that I was in, that I think really, made an effort to kind of say, no, girls and women can do math and can do science. And so I'm sure that played a role And then when I moved over into more of the energy sector, it was just kind of more of the same of, not seeing a lot of women around. And certainly within the energy policy space and energy research space, it's more of the same. So I think we have, I look at it kind of, it depends. There's an optimistic and a pessimistic way to look at it. I think the optimistic way is that things have gotten a lot better, right? And some of the worst occurrences that happened where people then really couldn't even do anything about it. I think we have made progress there, but there's still a long way to go, and we know that there's all kinds of issues around unconscious bias and other biases that come into play when we talk about women advancing in the fields of energy and the fields of science. And so there's still a lot more that I think needs to be done, and I think it's important to acknowledge that there's still more effort that needs to be made.
Now, looking back from your point of view, do you think that the next generation, the youth that are in school or just graduating, it seems to me that there are a lot more young women who are getting technical degrees, getting technical designations, rising up through the ranks. And do you think it's easier for them now than it was for, say, your generation of women?
I think especially in the earlier days, as you say, and that's really one of the challenges I know within the field of science, for example, is this concept of the leaky pipeline. So you have maybe quite a number of women who actually are graduating with degrees in a field, but then as you move along, there becomes fewer and fewer, and more women end up leaving than men. And so I think that that is still really an issue that needs to be dealt with. And there's there's a lot of people that are looking at ways to do so, and I think that's a really positive shift. But I don't think it's not a problem that's been solved. And I think for young women, one of the challenges is really when you sort of reach that wall, wherever that is, because you kind of are able to go along for a while feeling like, oh, well, it's fine. It's not any different. I'm not facing any, particular challenges. And then at some point that does come up, and it's sort of a double whammy of the barrier being there, and also actually even needing the time to recognize what it is that's been going on if it's the first time that you're kind of encountering that.
Do you think that as the economy shifts towards clean energy, clean technology, and the energy transition accelerates, that we're going to see the more women play a bigger role in that than we might have been, say, in the old oil and gas, the hydrocarbon economy, the fossil fuel economy?
I hope we will. I don't think that it will just happen like that, right? And if you look at sectors like, the solar industry, for example, unfortunately, what we see is a bit of a repetition of other sectors of the energy economy where there really is a minority of women and as well as visible minorities that are represented. So, it hasn't just been fixed by moving to other energy sources. That said, I think that those parts of the industry realize that there is an issue, and they're trying to take steps again to address that. So I do hope that as we are shifting into these other forms of energy that are powering our energy systems, that we are able to make changes.
Well, I'll wrap up with this thought, and I've expressed this to you before, Sarah, but I find female experts in energy are some of my favorite interviews. They tend to be very articulate. They're very insightful. They're technically as competent as their male counterparts are, and we do a lot of interviews of women for our both podcasts and video for that very reason.
Yeah, and I think I guess a piece of that, I think, is probably a result of an unfortunate thing, which is that women that aren't, really excelling, that aren't at the top of their class, that aren't able to be very articulate, sort of suffer more from an unfair, judging system. And so it's really, I think you often see that it's really in order to kind of be convinced that you have a role to play, you have to be able to kind of perform at a different level. And so I think that sometimes does sort of come through, or if you're bringing a different point of view, for whatever reason, you have to be able to, have a lot more evidence to back that up, because you're sort of, you're viewed as less trustworthy or less credible sort of just off the bat. And so that there has to be something to make that up. So I think there can be a part of that behind what you're seeing there, which is not to say, you know, that I hope that we can all become more mediocre or something, but I think that it means that there are a lot of really excellent women with great ideas that really aren't part of the conversation because they've faced kind of a barrier that's simply too high.
Sara, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.